In the 1970s, some of the absolute greatest, most expensive wines in Italy were being produced in Tuscany.
Oh, absolutely. We are talking about truly visionary wines here.
Right, wines that were literally beating top-tier French estates in these huge international blind tastings. And yet, the Italian government legally downgraded them to the exact same category as, the cheapest bottom-shelf jug wine you could find in a supermarket.
Yeah, it's honestly one of the most absurd paradoxes in the entire history of winemaking. I mean, the government essentially looked at a masterpiece, saw that the painter didn't use the legally mandated type of brush, and just classified it as finger painting.
It's wild. So today, we are going to find out exactly why that happened. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Because if you have ever stood in the Italian wine section of a grocery store, you know exactly how intimidating it can be. When you look at a bottle from New Zealand and it says Sauvignon Blanc, nice and clear.
Right. Or California, it just says Cabernet Sauvignon.
Exactly. But you look at an Italian label and suddenly you are holding what looks like a classified government dossier. It doesn't tell you the grape. There are these long, unpronounceable acronyms everywhere.
And the seals?
Yes. The intricate, brightly colored ministerial bands glued over the cork, complete with, individual serial numbers.
It really is an alphabet soup.
Yeah.
You've got IGT, DOC, DOCG. For the average consumer, if you don't have the decoder ring, it basically feels like you are being locked out of a very exclusive, very complicated club.
Well, our mission today is to hand you that decoder ring. We have gathered a massive stack of sources, expert wine guides, sommelier notes, educational transcripts to turn you, the listener, into a confident, code-breaking Italian wine shopper.
That's the goal.
We're going to unpack exactly what those letters and government seals actually mean, how the chemistry of these wines works with your food, and how to spot a world-class rebel hiding in plain sight.
And to crack this code, we really can't just look at a single label. We have to look at a pyramid.
Okay, pyramid.
Yeah. The Italian wine classification system is built as a strict hierarchy. It's all about quality, geography, and history. But before we can understand the luxury wines at the very top, we have to look at the foundation.
Right. We have to understand why Italy even felt the need to heavily regulate its wine in the first place. Because looking at the historical notes from our stack, Italy's viticultural history is massive. I mean, it stretches back millennia.
Oh, absolutely. The ancient Romans were cultivating vineyards across their entire empire.
Yeah.
The Tiber River practically flowed with this stuff.
Yeah, and even in the Middle Ages, local guilds were trying to protect the reputation of their regional wines.
But if you fast forward to the mid-20th century, specifically the post-war economic boom leading up to 1963, Italy realized they had a massive problem on their hands.
Which was what? Exactly. Just too much wine.
Sort of. They had these historic, world-famous wine regions, but mass production was completely diluting their reputation. There was this wild variation in quality.
I see.
And the market was just flooded with cheap imitations riding on the coattails of famous regional names. So they needed a legal system to guarantee to the consumer exactly where a wine came from and how it was made.
Which brings us to the 1963 classification law. And the foundation of that system, the wide, flat base of our pyramid, is a category called Vino da Tavola, or simply VDT, table wine.
Exactly. And Vino da Tavola is the foundation because it represents a complete lack of government intervention.
So no rules at all.
Pretty much. If a winemaker's making a VDT, they can source their grapes from literally anywhere in Italy. They might blend a white grape from the snowy north with a red grape from the blistering south.
Wow.
Yeah, there are no historic rules about aging or grape varieties whatsoever.
So it's essentially a freestyle cooking competition. I mean, the chef can run into the national pantry, grab any ingredient from anywhere in Italy, and just experiment.
That's a great way to put it.
But looking at how the market views table wine, it definitely carries a stigma. I have to ask, does VDT automatically mean it's a terrible, low-quality wine?
Well, historically, yes. It often was just basic, everyday drinking wine that wouldn't even be exported. But mechanically speaking, the lack of rules doesn't inherently mean bad grapes.
Okay, so what does it mean?
What it provides is a blank canvas. The trade-off is simply that the government won't put a stamp of regional authenticity on it. You get freedom, but you lose the prestige of the region.
Right, but a blank canvas doesn't really help a winemaker who wants to prove they are making a historically authentic, high-quality regional wine. To
Exactly.
protect those specific, world-famous historic recipes from being copied or diluted, the government had to build a fortress. And that takes us to the middle tier of the pyramid, the traditionalists.
Right. To protect those recipes, that 1963 law established the DOC, Denominazione di Origine Controllata.
Or the denomination of controlled origin, though we'll just stick to DOC for sanity's sake.
Yeah, definitely stick to DOC.
Looking at our sommelier notes, the DOC label isn't just about drawing a line on a map. It's basically a straitjacket for winemakers, right?
Oh, a total straitjacket. It dictates exactly which grape varietals are allowed, the specific aging techniques, and even the maximum yields.
Wait, maximum yields? You mean dictating how many bis you are legally allowed to grow per acre?
Exactly. And that yield cap is actually one of the most crucial elements of quality control. It all comes down to basic plant biology.
Walk us through that, because that sounds counterintuitive. Wouldn't you want more grapes?
Do you think so? For profit. But a grapevine only has a limited amount of energy and nutrients it can pull from the soil. If you let it grow massive, heavy clusters of hundreds of grapes, those nutrients are spread far too thin.
Oh, I get it. So the flavor gets watered down.
Precisely. The resulting wine will taste watery and diluted. But if the government forces you to prune the vines and limit the yield, the plant pumps all of its concentrated flavor compounds, sugars, and minerals into a much smaller number of grapes.
That makes total sense. Our sources actually gave us some great everyday examples of this tier. Prosecco DOC is a huge one.
Yes, very popular.
It has to come from a specific region in the Northeast, and it has to be made primarily with the Glera grape, or Frascati, the famous white wine made near Rome,
Right.
or Valpolicella from the Veneto region. These are all heavily regulated DOCs. And to prove it to the consumer, the government actually tracks the packaging.
They do. When you buy an authentic DOC bottle, you will see a specific thin blue ministerial band pasted across the top of the foil. It's literally a government receipt of authenticity.
But apparently, even this heavily guarded fortress wasn't strict enough for the absolute pinnacle of Italian wine. So in 1980, the government added a brand new peak to the pyramid, the DOCG.
And the G stands for Garantita, guarantees.
What's the difference?
Well, the DOCG is essentially the VIP lounge.
Right.
The geographic areas are shrunk down to the absolute most premium hillside vineyards. And the grape yields we just talked about,
Yeah.
they're forced to be even lower to concentrate the flavors even further.
Yeah.
But the defining feature of the DOCG is the testing.
Testing, like a lab test.
Exactly that. Before a wine can legally be bottled with a DOCG label, it has to be sent to a government agency for chemical analysis. And here's the kicker. It must pass a rigorous sensory tasting panel.
Okay, I have to push back on this tasting panel concept. Isn't a panel checking for historical typicity inherently flawed?
How so?
Well, it seems like it actively punishes innovation. Let's say a winemaker discovers a new technique that makes the wine objectively taste better, maybe smoother or more complex, but it deviates from the 18th century flavor profile. They fail the test and lose their status. Right?
It absolutely punishes innovation. But from the government's perspective, that is a feature, not a bug.
Really?
Yeah, the DOCG isn't about subjective deliciousness. It's a museum preservation effort. Think of it like a strict driver's test mixed with an art restoration.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You don't repaint the Mona Lisa just because you think neon green looks subjectively better today.
All right, fair point, yeah.
A DOCG Barolo, which is a famous, very powerful red wine from the Piedmont region made entirely from Nebbiolo grapes. It must taste the way a Barolo has historically tasted for generations. The panel is literally checking for the classic aromas of tar and roses, the correct pale brick red color, and the traditionally high tannins.
Wow, and if they pass that strict historical driver's test, they get the ultimate packaging.
They do.
You aren't just getting a blue band. You get a brown or gold ministerial band. Every single bottle has a unique alphanumeric serial number printed on it.
It's heavily tracked.
The government even mandates that a DOCG wine can never be sold in a bottle larger than 5 liters just to prevent mass-market jug sales.
That's right. Some famous DOCG examples from our stack include Brunello di Montalcino, which actually must age for a minimum of 5 years before release.
5 years? That's intense.
And, of course, the iconic Chianti Classico from Tuscany. When you buy a DOCG, you are buying a literal guarantee of history. But the friction you pointed out earlier.
The conflict between preserving history and actually improving the wine.
Exactly. That conflict leads us directly to the most dramatic rebellion in European wine history.
Which brings us back to our opening paradox. You have these rigid, tradition-bound rules on one side, and you have human creativity on the other.
And eventually, they collided.
They collided in a spectacular way, upending our nice, neat pyramid. So we are moving from the traditionalists to the rebels.
To understand the rebellion, we have to look at the specific rules for Chianti in the mid-20th century.
Okay, set the scene for us.
For a wine to be legally called Chianti under the strict DOC rules of the time, the recipe mandated that you use mostly native Sangiovese grapes, which makes sense. But bizarrely, you were also legally required to blend in a certain percentage of white grapes.
White grapes in a red wine.
Yes, like Malvasia or Trebbiano.
That is wild. It's like being a master baker who is legally required to pour a cup of vanilla extract into every single dark chocolate cake just because a 200-year-old village charter demands it.
That is a perfect way to describe it. If you are trying to make a deeply complex, age-worthy, premium red wine, being forced to dump white grapes into the vat is going to completely dilute the power and the structure of that red wine.
So what happened?
The visionary winemakers of Tuscany finally reached their breaking point. The sources highlight two massive turning points here. First, in the 1940s, an estate called Tenuta San Guido did the unthinkable.
What did they do?
They planted French Bordeaux grapes, specifically Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, in the stony soils of the Bulgari area in Tuscany, and they created a wine called Sassicaia.
We have to emphasize what a massive cultural transgression that was. I mean, Italy has hundreds of its own native ancient grape varieties.
That's right.
Importing French grapes and planting them in historic Italian soil was viewed by the traditionalists as an insult to Italian heritage. It was like bringing in a French consultant to rewrite the Italian Constitution.
Oh, it was scandalous. And then in 1971, the famous Antinori family escalated the rebellion even further. They released a wine called Tignanello. They used their native Sangiovese grapes, but they flat out refused to add the mandatory white grapes.
Good for them.
And to add insult to injury, they blended in that scandalous French Cabernet Sauvignon and aged it in small, modern French oak barrels instead of the traditional large Italian casks.
So they completely threw the DOC rulebook out the window.
Completely. And the results were stunning. The wines were richer, they were more complex, and had incredible aging potential. The international wine press went absolutely crazy for them.
Right, eventually coining the term Super Tuscans.
Exactly.
Right.
The world recognized them as masterpieces. But the Italian government's classification system was blind to quality. It only cared about the recipe.
So because Sassicaia and Tignanello broke the historical rules, they couldn't legally be classified as DOC or DOCG.
Nope. Which means they were legally downgraded to the very bottom of the pyramid.
They were officially classified as vino da tavola, table wine.
Yep, just basic table wine.
It's like a legendary rock band, let's say the Rolling Stones, selling out stadiums globally, but being forced by the government to play their hometown concert in a tiny, dingy dive bar simply because they refused to wear the mandatory tuxedo required at the Symphony Hall.
That's exactly what it was like.
Yep.
And the irony of that status mismatch is what finally forced the government's hand.
I can imagine.
You had a situation where Italy's most prestigious, sought-after wines that were selling for hundreds of dollars a bottle to collectors in New York and London, were carrying the exact same legal classification as the cheap, mass-produced jug wine sitting on the bottom shelf of the supermarket.
It was a profound embarrassment to the entire regulatory system, so the government had to build a brand new venue just to accommodate their genius.
Right. To fix this absurd loophole, they introduced a brand new tier in 1992, sliding it right between the basic table wine and the strict DOC. They called it IGT Indicazione Geografica Tipica.
And how did that fix things?
Well, the IGT tier was the perfect political compromise. It guarantees the wine comes from a broad geographic area. For example, if a bottle says Toscana IGT, it legally guarantees that 85% of the grapes inside came from the region of Tuscany.
Okay, 85%.
But beyond that geographic baseline, the IGT gives the winemaker immense creative freedom.
They demand the regionality, but after that, they just let the winemakers go wild.
Exactly.
They can plant international grapes like Merlot or Syrah. They can experiment with any blending ratios they want. They can use whatever aging techniques they prefer. It is a classification based on geography, but completely divorced from strict historical recipes.
And this completely shifted the landscape. Today, many of those legendary Super Tuscans like Tignanello still proudly wear the IGT label.
Wow.
What's even more telling is that some highly prestigious estates actively refuse to seek DOCG status. They deliberately choose to stay in the IGT category because they value their creative freedom in the vineyard and the cellar far more than they value the government's top-tier seal of approval.
Which means, for you, the listener standing in the wine aisle, the IGT is your absolute secret weapon.
100%.
Because the average shopper looks at the pyramid, assumes DOCG is the only marker of quality, and assumes IGT is just a medium-tier compromise. But you are the one who knows that an unassuming IGT label might actually be a world-class, critically acclaimed Super Tuscan in disguise.
A lower tier on the pyramid absolutely does not mean lower quality in the glass.
So true.
We've now scaled the entire pyramid. We have the freestyle Vino da Tavola at the base. We have the creative, rebel-friendly IGT tier. We have the historically strict DOC. And at the absolute peak, we have the heavily tested, serial-numbered DOCG.
But understanding the laws and decoding the government bans is only half the battle.
Exactly. The whole point of Italian wine is drinking it with amazing food.
Yes. Looking at the sommelier notes, these wines aren't meant to be sipped alone on a couch. They are fundamentally engineered, on a chemical level, to interact with a meal. Let's bring this pyramid to your dinner plate. What stands out to you regarding the chemistry of these pairings?
The core mechanism of pairing Italian wine relies on its structure, specifically acidity and tannins.
Tannins, right?
Tannins are naturally occurring chemical compounds found in the skins, seeds, and stems of grapes. They would create that dry, astringent, almost cottonmouth feeling when you drink a heavy red wine.
I know that feeling well.
Let's start at the top of the pyramid with the DOCG Barolo we mentioned earlier.
The king of wines from the Piedmont region.
All right. Barolo is a heavily structured wine with high alcohol and massive tannins. If you drink it with a light salad, the tannins will completely overwhelm your palate. It demands rich, heavy food.
Like what?
The classic pairing for a DOCG Barolo is red meat, strong, mature cheeses, and specifically dishes featuring the famous white truffles native to the Piedmont region.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
It is. The intense, earthy, savory notes of the wine locked together chemically with the umami of the truffle.
Okay, so if a Barolo requires that kind of heavy, earthy meal because of its aggressive structure, what happens when we step down into the DOC tier and look at a wine made from dried grapes? Because the sources mentioned a fascinating DOC wine from the Veneto region called Amarone.
Ah, Amarone della Valpolicella. This is a brilliant example of DOC rules dictating a highly specific chemical mechanism. To make Amarone, winemakers harvest the grapes and then literally leave them to dry and shrivel on straw mats for months before fermenting them.
Like making raisins.
Exactly like making raisins.
Yeah.
As the water inside the grape evaporates, the sugar concentration skyrockets.
Right, and during fermentation, yeast eats sugar and creates alcohol.
You got it. Because there is so much concentrated sugar in these shriveled grapes, the yeast can survive much longer, pumping out massive amounts of alcohol.
Wow.
The resulting wine is incredibly strong, complex, and viscous, often hitting 15 or 16% alcohol by volume, with deep flavors of dark fruit and baking spices.
With that kind of weight and alcohol, you need an equally weighty dish. Our guides suggest heavy braised meats. Or, if you want to be truly authentic to its home in Verona, an Amarone risotto, where the powerful wine itself is actually used to cook the dish.
Yes, that is a perfect pairing.
Ah,
Now let's look at the rebels, the IGT Super Tuscans.
let's do it.
Because these are often Bordeaux-style blends, heavily utilizing Cabernet Sauvignon, they are incredibly rich, oaky, and packed with their own tannins.
And this is where the chemistry of fat comes in. A thick, rare steak, roasted wild game, or a rich stew is perfect.
Oh, absolutely.
Because those astringent tannin molecules in the Super Tuscan will chemically bind to the fat molecules and proteins in the meat, rather than binding to the proteins on your tongue. The fat essentially neutralizes the harshness, making the wine taste incredibly smooth and fruity, while the wine cuts through the heaviness of the meat.
Spot on. But this raises a very practical challenge for the consumer. Well, if you hold a bottle of DOCG Chianti, you know roughly what's in it, because the historical rules dictate the recipe. But since the IGT category is the Wild West of creative blends, and the label often doesn't list the specific grapes, how do you pair it if you don't know the chemistry of what's inside the bottle?
That is the eternal challenge of the IGT. Is there a foolproof rule of thumb for a beginner who just wants to make a nice dinner?
There is a golden rule in the culinary world, and it applies beautifully to the Italian IGT. What grows together goes together.
I love that. Rely on the regionality.
Exactly. The 85% rule of the IGT guarantees the region. Even if the winemaker is bending the traditional rules and using international French grapes, those grapes were still grown in that specific regional soil, baked in that specific regional sun.
So if you have a Toscana IGT, pair it with traditional Tuscan food. Think rich tomato sauces, wild boar ragu, hard pecorino cheese, and roasted vegetables drizzled with local olive oil.
Perfect. And if you have a Puglia IGT from the extreme sunny south of the boot, pair it with the bold, rustic, spicy dishes of southern Italy. Trust the regional geography over the specific grape variety.
What grows together goes together. That is a brilliant shortcut. And we certainly cannot finish a dinner without dessert.
No, we cannot.
The sources mention some very specific pairings for Italian dessert wines, which have their own historical classifications.
Yes. If you are in Tuscany, you have Vinsanto. This is a sweet wine, also often made from partially dried grapes to concentrate the sugars. But the traditional way to consume this is highly interactive.
Interactive.
Yeah, you don't just sip it. You take Cantucci, which most of us know as hard almond biscotti,
Yeah.
and you literally dump them directly into the glass of wine to soften them up before eating them.
Dunking cookies in your wine. If you did that in France, they might arrest you.
In Tuscany, it is practically mandatory.
That's great.
And if we travel south to the island of Sicily, we have Marsala, a famous fortified wine. Sweet Marsala pairs brilliantly with rich chocolate desserts or a traditional Zabaglione custard.
Yeah.
But Marsala is also uniquely made in a dry style, which is fantastic, paired with strong, pungent, salty cheeses at the end of a meal.
So let's recap this incredible journey. You, the listener, are no longer standing in the wine aisle feeling overwhelmed by the alphabet soup. You now hold the decoder ring.
You definitely do.
You know that at the base of the pyramid is Vino da Tavola, the completely unrestricted freestyle blank canvas. You know the middle ground is the incredibly powerful IGT, the secret weapon built for the rebels, where winemakers have the freedom to innovate while still honoring their region.
You know, the strict recipe-bound traditionalists of the DOC, tracked by that blue ministerial band. And you know the absolute elite, heavily tested tier, the DOCG, with its brown and gold seals, individual serial numbers, and rigorous sensory panels designed to guarantee historical perfection.
You know how to spot them. You know why a Rebel Super Tuscan might hide in the IGT category. And you know the chemistry of how to bring them home and pair a tannic Barolo or a massive 16% Amarone with the perfect dish. You've essentially mastered the mechanics and the drama behind centuries of Italian wine law.
It is a vibrant history, but it is also a history that is facing a very real crisis.
Which brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with, something to mull over the next time you pour a glass.
Right.
We spent a lot of time talking about the rigid, traditional rules of the DOCG fortress. The tasting panel guarantees that a Barolo tastes exactly how a Barolo tasted 200 years ago. But we live in a rapidly changing world.
We do.
As climate change begins to significantly alter the baseline temperatures, the rainfall, and the soil conditions of Italy's most historic regions, the biology of the grapes themselves is fundamentally changing. Sugars are spiking earlier, acids are dropping.
It creates a profound dilemma for the traditionalists. If the changing climate physically forces the wine to taste different, will the incredibly rigid, museum-like rules of the DOCG have to adapt just to survive?
Right.
Will the government be forced to allow different grapes or new scientific techniques simply to cope with the heat, breaking their own historical guarantee?
Or will the flexible, rule-breaking IGT category, the venue originally built to house the rebels, eventually become the primary standard for the future of Italian excellence? Will flexibility outlive tradition?
It is a fascinating tension between preserving the past and surviving the future.
So the next time you are staring at that intimidating wall of Italian wine, don't look at it like a confusing government dossier. Look at it like a living history book full of traditionalists and rebels. And remember, whether it has a gold serial number guaranteeing its past or it's a rule-breaking Super Tuscan pointing toward the future, the best wine is always the one you enjoy drinking. Thanks for diving deep with us.